HR issues can kill you. One complaint against your company can turn your world upside down. And you spend way too much time dealing with HR when you should be spending your time on making a profit. You should talk to Bambi. With Bambi, get access to your own dedicated US-based HR manager starting at just $99 per month. They get to know you and your business while providing HR expertise and the personal touch you need and want. They're available by phone, email, and real-time chat, so onboarding and terminations run smoothly. Team members reach peak performance, and your business stays compliant with changing HR regulations. And with Bambi's HR Autopilot, you'll automate important HR practices like setting policies, training, and feedback. HR managers can easily cost $80,000 a year, but Bambi starts at $99 per month. Schedule your free conversation today to see how much Bambi can take off your plate. Go to Bambi.com right now and type in Accelerate under podcast when you sign up. It'll really help the show. Spelled BAM, BEE.com. Bambi.com. Type in Accelerate.
Hey guys, this is Gabby Douglas. If you have an active lifestyle like me, hydration is key. That's why I love the Hydration Watermelon Smoothie from Smoothie King. Blended with whole fruits, coconut water, and more electrolytes than some of the leading sports drinks. Hydration Watermelon is the cleaner way to hydrate, with no artificial colors, flavors, or preservatives. So you can recover and perform at your peak ability during the summer heat. Order online or through the app for pickup or delivery. Smoothie King, rule the day.
Welcome to Accelerate Your Business Growth with your host, Diane Helbig. Diane is a leading small business development and leadership coach, author, and speaker who is passionate about sharing valuable ideas, tips, and techniques with business professionals worldwide. Diane brings you the world's experts and gurus in all things business. Whether it's sales, structure, social media, planning, or plateauing, guests bring their expertise and energy to each episode. When growing your business is your focus, Accelerate Your Business Growth is the show to listen to. Got a topic or guest suggestion? Let Diane know. The goal is to make sure you have the information you need to move your business forward. Thanks for joining us. Settle in and enjoy.
Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for joining me. Today's podcast is sponsored by Audible.com and Gusto. Audible.com is a leading provider of spoken audio entertainment and information. Listen to audiobooks whenever and wherever you want. Get a free book when you sign up for a 30-day free trial at audibletrial.com/businessgrowth. Gusto offers modern benefits to small businesses across the country. They were even named Best Online Payroll by PC Mag. As a listener, you'll get 3 months free when you run your first payroll. Sign up and give it a try at gusto.com/accelerate. Accelerate Your Business Growth podcast continues to enjoy inclusion on lists of the best podcasts to listen to. We recently were put on the list of 12 business podcasts to listen to if you want to increase your sales on allbusiness.com. And that was also shared on Forbes.com, so we're pretty excited about that. That is really because of the guests who join me for a conversation. These are folks who have expertise in a particular area of business, and they give of their time and their knowledge to all of you so that you can get the answers to the questions that you have or the things you've been wondering about, and you can take actionable information back into your business so you can be more successful and happier. Today is no different. My guest today is Allie Smith. Allie is the Product Marketing Manager for trademark.com. She's worked on intellectual property SaaS solutions for the last several years of her marketing career and believes in making world-class resources available, accessible, and affordable to businesses of all sizes. Based in Boston, Allie holds an MBA from the University of Warwick in the UK. Thanks so much for joining me today, Allie.
Thanks for having me, Dan.
I'm happy to have you here. I really want to jump right in on this, and I'm wondering if you would share with the listeners why trademarking is so important, not just for business owners, but I would say especially in the small business space.
Definitely. So, what it comes down to is the fact that brands are valuable, but they're also really vulnerable, right? So a brand is a business's identity. It represents its products and services, sure, but it's also its market reputation. A brand is a promise of consistency and reliability to customers. And at the end of the day, those are the foundations of trust and loyalty. But just creating and using a word or a logo or a slogan to distinguish your business isn't really enough to keep someone else from using it too. And actually in the US, it's sort of common law marks, when you just pick a word or a logo and start using that to identify your business. These don't provide any protection from copycats beyond your local area where you do business. And so that's why it's really important to properly trademark a brand by registering it with the U.S. Patent and Trademark Office in the U.S. This gives your business a lot more protection in the form of proper legal ownership nationwide.
Do you think that people think to themselves when they start a business and they get a logo and whatnot, that they think, well, as long as I'm covered locally, I don't necessarily need to worry about it, and they're not necessarily thinking about long-term what the possibilities are of where they could take their business?
Yeah, absolutely. That's one of the main things we, really promote businesses thinking about is, the mark or the brand that you're starting with today is hopefully going to, carry you through many business successes to come in the future. And it's so important to do your planning up front around your brand and around your trademark so that you don't run into issues in the future, particularly around geographic expansion, or even international expansion. These kinds of things are super important to think about up front.
Okay, and you just made me think of something else. I felt like when you were first, talking about why it's so important, that there could potentially be a risk of someone using a company's mark and not provide the same level of service or quality as the company, and that could be damaging to them if they're not really paying attention. Is that a thing?
Yeah, absolutely. So, the consequences of trademark infringement are real. There was a survey conducted that indicated about 74%, about 3/4 of brands reported experiencing some sort of copycat activity just in the past year. And the most commonly reported consequences of this kind of infringement, trademark infringement, include customer confusion. So like you said, if your business has a phenomenal reputation for, selling a particular product or providing a given service, and you have a copycat out there in the market that you end up competing with, that your customers can't tell the difference between, your business and the other. They think that they're related in some fashion, and the other business is really providing, a subpar experience. Like that is going to have a very tangible impact on your own business. So we're talking about erosion of customer trust, loss of revenue, just the absolute sunk time, energy, and resource that it takes to resolve these kinds of disputes if you're not proactive about monitoring for them in the market. And, in the worst case scenario, which certainly is not unheard of, businesses can find that they need to completely rebrand. And I think one thing that's really important for small businesses or businesses of any size really to understand is that It really doesn't matter whether you're the copycat or the victim. The damage done on both sides is really significant. So, if you're thinking about launching a brand, it really is your responsibility to do your due diligence up front and make sure that you are not intentionally or otherwise being a copycat on someone else's trademark. And if you're a trademark owner and you have a brand, it's your responsibility to, keep an eye on the market and look for copycats. And also another thing that businesses often overlook is, once you've registered your mark, yes, you have formally secured nationwide rights to that brand in the U.S., but it's important to understand that the trademark office is not an enforcement body. They are just a regulatory body that helps, business owners secure marks, but they are not responsible for, enforcing that mark once it has been registered. And that's usually a big source of confusion for people. They think that the trademark office is kind of making sure that there aren't any copycats and that, they're letting everybody know that they're the particular owner of this mark, but that's absolutely not the case. That is 100% the responsibility of the trademark owner.
That's a huge point. I think you're right. I think people do think they're like the trademark police.
Exactly.
But that's like really only at the beginning, right? To make sure that you're not trying to get a trademark on something that already is. Exactly.
So maybe it's helpful to talk a little bit about how, the process works for trademark registration.
Sure. Yeah, that'd be great.
So, it really all starts out with picking a unique name. I can't stress how important this is. And another thing that's really critical to understand is that not all trademarks are actually eligible for registration with the trademark office. So there is actually what's called like the spectrum of distinctiveness. And it sounds like a little jargony, but it's pretty easy to understand. Basically, the trademark office breaks down potential brand names into a scale. And on the low end, there are what are called generic names. And these are just, common terms. So for example, if I sell fruit, I couldn't call my business Apple. Like that's just a descriptive generic term for my product. At the other end of this distinctiveness spectrum, there are what are called fanciful marks. And this is a category of marks that are, totally made up, essentially, sort of almost nonsense words that don't have any other meaning. So like Xerox is an example of that, and so is Google. And basically, these marks are considered to be very, very strong because they don't have any other association attached to them. Like your business is going to be the only association that customers would have with that word. The flip side is that it takes a lot of work as a business, right, to get that message out into the market and build that brand equity around that name. But the payoff is that you're very unlikely to encounter another business in the same area of service or, with similar products to your own if you go that route. So, marks that are very generic and very common, the USPTO actually often won't even register. Marks that are very unique are fanciful or even arbitrary. So arbitrary marks are where a business uses an existing word for their brand, but their product is not in any way connected to the connotation of that word. So Apple is a great example. The technology company, computer and technology company. So again, the first step is to pick a unique name, hopefully something made up, something where you're not going to have a lot of existing competition or even future competition. And then the second step is and this is absolutely critical, is to make sure that no one else is already using that name or a name that's really similar. So it's advisable to go out and look at businesses, products, services, not only in just your own industry, but also in related ones, where there might be some common customer overlap. And stay away from picking something that, sounds similar to an existing mark or might be spelled similarly or something that has a similar meaning. So, if you find, if you pick a name and then you do your research and you find that, someone else with a similar business offering has that name and you decide to just change one letter, it's not a good play. It's not going to serve you in the long run. You really want to be as unique as possible. And another thing that's really important to be aware of is that it's important to stay away from famous marks. So this is usually pretty intuitive, but I think it bears repeating that really famous marks like Nike or McDonald's or, these businesses that have huge, deep customer recognition that you could basically go anywhere in the US and, if you ask, your average consumer if they're aware of this brand, they're likely to say yes. Then it's important to make sure that there's no, that the name that you're pursuing doesn't have any similarity or couldn't be confused with a famous brand like that. Famous brands benefit from a special level of protection that is important to be aware of. So when you're searching for, looking for similarities, one source that's really important, everyone knows to kind of conduct a Google search and maybe look at registered business names, but you absolutely can't overlook the importance of searching the U.S. Patent and Trademark Office database of currently registered trademarks, because this is the exact search that the Trademark Office is going to do when they receive your application. So there are a number of services out there, including ones on trademark.com that are very easy to use and are very, kind of layperson friendly. You don't necessarily need to have deep legal expertise to kind of kick this off and get your search started. But looking at the trademark database is incredibly important because it's showing you all of the marks that have successfully been registered by the PTO and the goods and services or the products and services that mark relates to and who owns the mark and all those kinds of details. So it gives you a very comprehensive understanding of the landscape, the brand landscape as it stands. And if you have anything sort of similar to anything that comes up in that search of already registered marks, it's really advisable to go back to the drawing table because you're just setting yourself up for potential headache going forward. So after you've done your search and you feel pretty good about your name, the next step is to complete and submit a trademark registration application. So we found that a lot of people generally don't necessarily know that it takes a while to get a trademark. The process takes on average about 10 months. And when you put your application together, you're not guaranteed to get the mark registered. It goes to the trademark office and they review it for completeness. They want to make sure that you gave them all the data that they need in order to evaluate your application. And they conduct that similarity search, as I mentioned. It's really advisable to have a trademark attorney review your application just to make sure that you sort of have the best shot going into the process because it takes as long as it does. And also the trademark office is not going to give you your money back if they reject your application. So you really want to make sure that all your T's are crossed and your I's are dotted kind of going in.
Okay, wait, I have a question about that.
Sure.
Hang on one second. So if someone's listening to this and they're thinking, okay, wow, 10 months, does that mean that they shouldn't or can't conduct business until they've gotten the trademark, or can they go ahead and do business while all of that is going through and use their mark?
Yeah, that's a great question.
Okay.
Yes. So indeed, it's really important to use your mark. So we would say that if you've done all your upfront homework and you have, done your due diligence of searching for a unique name and you feel really confident that, you're not being a copycat, and there's nothing out there that's going to pose a problem for you, then absolutely you should start using your name. And actually in the US, the legal preference is actually given to those brand owners who are first to use their name as opposed to the first to file a registration application with the trademark office. That's something that's really unique about the US. There are a couple of other countries that are first to use countries, but in other areas of the world, it's often whoever gets to the trademark office fastest. So absolutely, trademark owners should, or small business owners should absolutely start using their mark as soon as they're confident that, they're in the clear and that they're not going to have any infringement issues with it. In fact, that's one of the key pieces of your application that the trademark office will ask you is, can you prove the date of first use of, using this brand to identify your goods and services in the market? Because as we discussed, it kind of establishes a hierarchy of, who can claim rights to that mark. Now, if you start using a mark, and you don't ever file a trademark registration application, you have what are called common law rights. And that does give you a little bit of ownership and protection in relation to the mark, but it's at a very low level. So it really only relates to being able to pursue copycat disputes or trademark infringement disputes in your local area. At the state level or even more narrow than that. So for example, if I, own a bakery and I call it, Allie's Pastries, and I'm here in Boston, if another Allie's Pastry opens in, California, I can't do anything about that if I haven't registered my mark. As a common law trademark owner, my rights are limited just to sort of my immediate location. So if someone opens around the corner, I might have a standing if I can prove that I've been using this mark longer than this competitor, but only if they're in my immediate jurisdiction.
Yeah, that's a biggie. Thank you for that, because I think that is also one of the things that confuses people. So let me take a quick sponsor break and then let's go on with that.
Cool.
Accelerate Your Business Growth podcast is happy to be sponsored by Audible.com and Gusto. Audible.com is a leading provider of spoken digital audio entertainment and information. They have over 150,000 titles to choose from, and you can listen to them on any device, including whatever you're hearing us on right now. And if you sign up at our link, which is audibletrial.com/businessgrowth, you get one free audiobook and a 1-month trial of the service. Some examples of books you can listen to on audible.com are Breathe to Succeed by Sandy Abrams and Leading Loyalty by Lena Renee. So visit audibletrial.com/businessgrowth, explore the books that are of interest to you, and receive one free audiobook when you sign up for the trial. Everybody loves payday, but loving a payroll provider, that's a little weird. Still, small businesses across the country love running payroll with Gusto. Gusto automatically files and pays your taxes. It's super easy to use, and you can add benefits and management tools to help take care of your team and keep your business safe. It's loyal, it's modern. You might fall in love yourself. Listeners get 3 months free when they run their first payroll. So visit gusto.com/accelerate to check it out. Today we're speaking with Allie Smith about protecting your brand. So Allie, I interrupted you when you were going through the process of, the steps that it takes to register a trademark. So did I stop you in the middle of it?
Pretty close, actually. So we talked about, picking a unique name, doing your due diligence to make sure that you're not a copycat if you decide to go forward using that name, submitting an application to the PTO. So once the trademark office gets your application, it sits in the queue for a while. There's a huge volume in the US. The trademark office processes about 1,600 applications daily. which is pretty incredible. So what happens is basically a trademark examiner is assigned to your application. This is a lawyer that works for the trademark office. They conduct that search against existing registered marks that we talked about before. They make sure your application is complete. And then if they find any problems, they're going to write to you and let you know. And, you kind of need to address that in order to move forward. But if everything is good and, your application is, stands up to their scrutiny and their review, they will publish what's called publishing your mark. And at this point, there's a really interesting process that happens. So after the trademark office examiner signs off and says, yes, this application is good to go, the mark is published in what's called the official gazette of the trademark office. This feels a little antiquated, but basically what they do is they start a 30-day period called the opposition period, where anyone with a valid claim can essentially make an argument to the trademark office for why your mark shouldn't be published. So there are many instances where the examiner will sign off on everything. It looks good to go. Then your mark gets published for opposition. And this is where it really pays off as a small business owner or a trademark owner to be paying attention. A lot of people don't understand that there is an opposition period, but this essentially, it's almost like a little bit of cover for the trademark office. Like, they're reviewing 1,600 marks a day. They're doing the absolute best they can to make sure that they're, before they grant a mark, that there are no conflicts. But they're humans, right? And they have great tools, but there's always room for error. And so they have this opposition period where they open it up to anybody who might have an issue with an issue with a mark that is pending registration. And it's fairly straightforward to file an opposition. You can get the help of an attorney. It's sort of some paperwork to fill out to explain how you or your business would be harmed by this mark being registered. And then if the PTO, accepts your claim, there's basically like a little mini hearing that happens in trademark court, essentially. And, it gets worked out from there. And so if you don't face any opposition, then you're granted rights to your mark and everything's great. If you do face an opposition, they can often be, some sort of negotiation can often be worked out of court. There are a lot of agreements struck between business owners where they can kind of find an ability to coexist with two marks that might be similar, either by limiting the products and services that the mark applies to, or, agreeing on geographic territories or that kind of thing. But if you already have a registered mark, it's incredibly important to pay attention to the new incoming marks that are waiting to be registered during this opposition period. It's a rolling 30 days. So every mark has a different date. You really need to pay constant attention to the marks that are in this pipeline, because this is your opportunity to be proactive. And if there is something, if there's a mark coming down the pipe that is, potentially suspiciously similar to your own or identical to your own, and also in your industry, you definitely want to stand up and say something about that and enforce your existing trademark rights. It's significantly cheaper than waiting for the mark to actually be registered and filing a lawsuit. It's a much more efficient and effective process than sort of full-blown litigation. Of course, it's a lot for a small business, or really any business, to keep track of all these marks, right? And, way back in the day, actually not that long ago, it was like an actual paper journal that got mailed around that attorneys primarily would look at. But, now in the age of online everything and, all the excellent data tools we have out there, there are a number of services including a fantastic one on trademark.com that automatically scan this incoming data from the trademark office every single day and alert you only when a potentially problematic mark has been detected. So it's sort of something, it's like a little bit of a set it and forget it. You don't need to be constantly poring over this data to make sure that there aren't any, potential copycats that are going to register a similar mark to yours. This service is so great because it just lets you know when there's a problem. It kind of takes that worry off your mind.
Yeah, that was one of the things I was thinking when you were talking about it. I was thinking, wow, that is a lot for someone to do. But if they are monitoring their trademark either through the tool on trademark.com or, who knows how, and they notice that someone is attempting to register something similar, what do they do?
Right. So it depends a little bit where that mark is in the process. Obviously, if you've caught it because you're looking at trademark registration data, then clearly they've, applied for that mark. If it hasn't reached the opposition period yet, you have a number of options. So one option available is to, put together a protest letter or a cease and desist. You can do that, on your own or with the help of an attorney. And all the applicant information is listed right there, in at least on trademark.com's alerts. We give you all the information that you would need to be able to put that kind of document together and get it out to the other party. So you can, simply send a letter indicating that, you hold these rights and there's a conflict. Another option is to file an opposition once it does hit that 30-day period. You can also reach out to the PTO in advance and let them know that the mark that they're reviewing conflicts with your prior rights. And then, oftentimes we've seen even just the act of reaching out, many times the other party will be willing to have some sort of discussion or they'll withdraw their application. So the recommendation is really to take some variety of action as soon as you determine that there is a potential problem. That's one of the things that's really important in terms of maintaining your trademark rights, is that you can demonstrate that any time that there has been, a substantiated conflict, that you did take action against the infringer to show that, you're exercising your rights.
Right. Yeah, boy, that is a huge point. It actually, I had a strange thing happen when I wrote my first book, and we gave it a title, and my publisher said, go get the URL. And when I went to get the URL, there was someone who already had it, and he didn't have a book. He had a program that had the same name. And so I reached out to my publisher and I said, do we have a problem here? No, we'll be fine. Well, we weren't fine, because once the book is published, the guy reached out to me, emailed me, and he said, hey, listen, wondering if you could stop using that name. I have a trademark on it. And so we had to retitle the book, because I was like, okay, I'm not touching this. This is, I get it. But it was interesting, because my understanding was you can't trademark a book title, but you can trademark like an educational program, a group of DVDs or something, or booklets or whatever that teach something. And that's what he had done. It just had the same name. It was just too close, because his was on business, right. Mine was on sales. So, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that's exactly right. As a trademark owner, you're trying to prevent any possible instance of customer confusion. And it sounds like, the book and the program, if they have a very similar focus and there's a total possibility that there could be, an audience overlap, then, it makes sense that he reached out with that. It's also a little bit like, adverse possession and property, where, if you know about an instance of infringement and you don't do anything about it, it can be much harder to act down the line. If you encounter future infringement, courts don't look on that very favorably if there are other instances of infringement that you didn't act on. So should it come to litigation, it's really important to be able to prove that, you've been enforcing your trademark rights. And actually, trademark monitoring is considered a form of enforcement that just shows that, you're really invested in this mark, you're invested in protecting it and you're using it currently. Those are all really important considerations if you do end up in a infringement suit.
Wow. So, what was the question? Excuse me. So, if someone, this is going to maybe sound like a strange question, but if someone's thinking to themselves that they have the domain for their brand, if they're thinking that that means they automatically have their trademark, that's not the case, is it?
No, that's a very common misconception, honestly. Owning a website domain does not give you trademark rights. They're really not connected. So, oftentimes if you are thinking about launching a product or launching a new brand or launching a business under a given name, you're probably going to want the domain if there is an online, channel to your presence. And so it's really smart to check domain availability before you go down the trademark route. But vice versa, if you've already secured the domain and you don't have a trademark, someone can come along and file a registration application with the PTO. And if they're approved, then they own that mark. And, you can end up in conflict there. If you're able to prove that you have pre-existing common law rights by having that domain, so maybe, you sell something through that site, or you're using it to deliver services to customers, you may have some common law rights there just by, having a web presence under that name, but it's very thin, I would say. It's not a safe assumption by any means. They're technically not connected. And if you want to kind of be in the realm of best practice, we definitely recommend, securing your mark through the PTO and not relying on just having an exclusive domain.
Okay. And will you explain the difference between the TM and the R symbols?
Of course. So this is, again, a little bit tricky sometimes. So the TM symbol just stands for trademark, and this is a way of telling the world that you are using a particular logo, word, combination thereof as your trademark. So this is the way that you are identifying your goods, your products and services out in the market. You do not have to have a registered trademark in order to use the TM. So basically everybody should always use the TM if you're doing business under a particular name. The R symbol is reserved only for trademarks that have been registered with the trademark office. And it's important to note that, just having submitted your application isn't sufficient. It has to be, has to have made it all the way through the process, cleared any oppositions, and actually made it onto the register to be able to use that mark next to your name. That's a really important distinction. And actually, it can be considered trademark fraud if you are using the R symbol next to either your name or logo that has not been registered by the trademark office. So when in doubt, use the TM. But otherwise, if you do have registered rights to that mark, by all means, use it. That's another thing that's really important is, consistency is something that people often don't consider. So, there are a couple things you can do to make sure that your mark isn't violated. One is, letting everybody know that is your mark. So the TM, if it's unregistered, the R, if it is registered. We already talked about the importance of monitoring your mark and enforcing it. Continual use is another aspect of maintaining your rights that often gets overlooked. So, after you successfully register your mark, the PTO wants to see that you are actually still using it in commerce to identify your goods. So they ask that you submit proof of that, usually at the between the 5th and 6th year after you register. Some paperwork you have to fill out. But basically, if you register for a mark and use it for a bit and, then you stop using it, 3 consecutive years of non-use are, in the eyes of the trademark office, essentially abandonment. So you're forfeiting your rights. So in order to maintain them, it's really important that you continue to use it. And not just use it, but actually use it correctly. So this can be really easy to overlook. You have to use the mark exactly as it was filed. So it can't be an abbreviation. It can't be, some sort of iteration of it or an alternate spelling or shortened. It has to be exactly as it appears on your paperwork. And also it has to apply to the products and services that you originally list on your application. So, if you register a mark for ice cream, and then you start also selling hot dogs, your hot dogs are not going to be covered by your ice cream mark. That's important to understand. And, the PTO isn't probably looking over your shoulder to make sure that all of this is, buttoned up. But in many industries, you can assume that your competitors are, and if they find some non-compliance or loophole, they very well may challenge you on it and raise it with the trademark office. And that's actually what happened recently. You might have heard in the news about McDonald's losing its Big Mac trademark in Europe. So there
what
was
happened?
So this was, I guess it's about maybe a couple months old now, but it was all over the news that McDonald's lost its Big Mac mark in Europe because there was an Irish chain, similar fast food chain called Super Mac, and they went to the EU IPO, the Intellectual Property Office in Europe, and basically put a case together to illustrate why McDonald's had not been correctly using its Big Mac mark. And one of the key points was that when McDonald's filed for the mark in Europe, under their goods and services, or the description of what the mark applies to, they included like everything in the kitchen sink. Like, it wasn't just the burger or the sandwich. It applied to sauces and oatmeal and dessert items and like restaurant services writ large kind of thing. They really packed in a lot under that mark. And at the end of the day, it came to bite them because the EU IPO essentially said, you are not using this mark as it was filed. They weren't able to prove that they were applying Big Mac to all these number of things that was part of the registration. And so they struck it from the record entirely. And it was really reinforcing this idea that, it's really use it or lose it.
Wow.
So this tiny little chain in Ireland had this, major intellectual property victory. And of course, McDonald's can challenge that. But it was just a good reminder that correct use, it can be critical.
Wow, that's a great story. That's crazy. And, good for the little guy. And he's paying attention, but that's where a big brand is easy to to spot. So how
Yeah.
long does a trademark last? I mean, do you have to renew it?
Yeah, so that's a great question. Unlike other forms of intellectual property, trademarks can live forever, but there are specific intervals at which you need to essentially show the trademark office that you're still using it and file more paperwork. So I believe the first is statements of use between the 5th and 6th year, and then after that it's every 10 years. And if you fail to file, or even if you fail to file on time without requesting an extension, your mark will be considered dead. And that essentially means that anybody can then submit a new application for it, including yourself. So if your mark does go dead and you want to revive it, you have to start all over again by submitting an application.
Wow. So you got to do it all over again.
Yeah, so it really pays to, not set it and forget it. In this instance, you really need to stay on top of, the care and feeding of your mark.
Right. Wow. Boy, Allie, this is great information. So, and it sounds like trademark.com has a lot of valuable resources for people to sort of navigate this whole thing. So will you tell us some about trademark.com and, how people can learn more?
Of course. So trademark.com is, a DIY tool that is designed to help small business owners protect their brands. So there are a number of things that entrepreneurs can find there. One is, help with registering their mark with the PTO, as we discussed. There's also a great search function that lets you go through the trademark database, the USPTO database, and look for similar marks before you apply. You can also enroll in trademark monitoring, and this is a fantastic service that will give you an alert about incoming new registration applications that may be problematically similar to your own. And then it gives you, of course, all the additional information that you would need to take action on that if you decide to do so. And then we have a ton of just educational resources on trademark best practice. So of course it's not legal advice, but it's really in-depth, help with understanding, how to be a good trademark owner, how to care for and protect your brand. And none of it is in legalese. It's very accessible, resources designed to get you going and make you, really equip you for this journey.
That's great. That is wonderful. What a great service. Well, thanks so much for sharing this information and that information with the listeners. And listeners, thank you for tuning in and learning more about this. This is an important topic that you do need to pay attention to. I would also like to thank our sponsors, Audible.com and Gusto. To get your free trial of Audible.com and a free audiobook, just go to audibletrial.com/businessgrowth to sign up. For payroll processing you'll love, sign up for a demo of Gusto today at gusto.com/accelerate. Listeners get 3 months free when they run their first payroll. As always, continue to prosper and be curious. And until we meet again on another episode of Accelerate Your Business Growth, goodbye and good day.
Welcome to Don't Retire, Graduate, the podcast that asks you what you want to be when you grow up so you can graduate into retirement with a purpose and a passion, whether you're 25, 85, or any age in between. Gain actionable financial and mindset tips from your favorite authors, podcasters, and influencers to help you reach that exciting next chapter. Listen now and start building your path to financial freedom and reframing what retirement can mean to you. This is your host, Eric Brotman, reminding you, don't retire, graduate.